They called him Old Wolf, not to his face, of course. David Chen wasn't the kind of man you openly mocked, but behind his back, in hushed tones, the younger guys at the Millbrook Range would chuckle. He was just a barista, after all, a quiet, middle-aged man who apparently traded lattes for live fire. They laughed, calling him Old Wolf, but when the barista pulled the trigger, the room froze. This is the story of how an ex-CIA operative, hiding in plain sight, reminded a room full of bravado what true skill and true silence really looked like. The Millbrook Firing Range wasn't a place for quiet contemplation. It was a cacophony of ambition and a symphony of steel. The air, thick with gunpowder and ambition, vibrated with the crack and thud of countless rounds finding their mark, or more often, missing it. Lane 7, tucked away in the furthest corner, was David Chen's usual spot. He arrived promptly at 6:45 a.m., 15 minutes before the official opening, signing the register with the same slow, deliberate scrawl he used for his coffee shop's daily specials. Chen. No first name, no rank, no idle chat with the range officer, just a nod, a brief, almost imperceptible acknowledgement. Then the familiar quiet march to his lane. He was a creature of habit, David. His uniform, if you could call it that, was always the same. Faded jeans, a tan flannel shirt rolled precisely to the forearms, and a brown baseball cap whose original blue hue had long surrendered to the sun. No patches, no slogans. The brim curled just enough to shade eyes that seemed to miss nothing. His boots, though worn, were impeccably clean, free of the dust that clung to most patrons' footwear. His range bag, carried low and steady in his right hand, never held more than the essentials: a single pistol case, a box of 45 ACP, and the battered thermos that was as much a part of his bench as the target stand itself. The regulars had their theories. Some called him Pops, others simply the old guy. Half of them dismissed him as another retired trucker with a pension and too much time on his hands. They'd joke about his solitary target, always shot at precisely 30 rounds before he'd pack up and leave. But the range staff, those who understood the nuanced language of marksmanship, had noticed subtle differences. The way his body moved, a quiet precision in every motion, the way his eyes, instead of fixing solely on the paper silhouette downrange, would linger on the metal backstop, as if calculating wind speed that wasn't even there. He never flinched from the recoil, he never wasted a bullet. He never even bothered to pick up his brass. Most on the line didn't notice, but the ones who knew what to look for, they noticed. That morning, the range buzzed with a different kind of energy. A squad of young Navy recruits, fresh-faced and brimming with the bravado of youth, had descended en masse. Off-duty, full of jokes, their competitive banter echoed across the lanes. Their presence, a stark contrast to David's quiet solitude, filled the space with an almost aggressive vibrance. They slapped backs, boasted about their scores, and occasionally their gazes drifted towards Lane 7, a silent judgment forming in their eyes. One of them, a tall, lean recruit with a crew cut and a glinting trident pin on his gym bag, set up 2 lanes over from David. His name was Jared. He was a SEAL trainee on leave, radiating the confidence of someone on the cusp of advanced training in Coronado, sharp enough to recognize real skill, perhaps, but still young enough to underestimate its quiet manifestation. At first, Jared paid David no mind, just another civilian plinking away next to him. But then a rhythm cut through the chaotic symphony of the range. Not volume, not recoil. A pattern. 3 shots, reset. 2 shots, reset. All tight, all deliberate. No wasted motion. It was a cadence that spoke of discipline, of repetition beyond obsession. Jared, mid-reload, felt a prickle of professional curiosity. He glanced sideways. The old man's grip was textbook. His stance, pure, unmoving, as if he were part of the very earth. He wasn't reacting to the gun, he was controlling it, anticipating its every kick, molding it to his will. It was then, as David smoothly brought the pistol back to the ready position after a flawless five-shot grouping, that Jared leaned a little, catching a glimpse of the man's forearm. The sleeve of the flannel shirt had ridden up just enough. It was faint, sun-faded, but unmistakable. A tattoo, not a flag, not an anchor, not a skull, just a number, 2 digits, and an insignia that Jared recognized immediately. He stiffened slightly, blinked, and looked again. That wasn't ink from a shop, the kind you got on a whim after a few beers. That was from a time when tattoos were earned, etched into skin after surviving something no one talked about. A mark of quiet endurance, not flashy declaration. Jared felt a sudden chill. Despite the heat of the range, he swallowed, his own training momentarily forgotten as a profound sense of awe began to settle over him. He waited a minute, forcing himself to breathe, watching the grouping on David's target get tighter with each volley, each bullet a testament to a skill honed over decades. Then, curiosity outweighing caution, and a strange, almost reverent respect taking root, Jared took a step sideways and spoke. "Jared, excuse me, sir, that ink on your arm, that's first recon, isn't it?" The old man didn't turn, didn't smile. He just emptied his magazine with one final, perfect shot, the echo reverberating with a new, strange weight. He set the pistol down slowly, the worn metal clinking softly against the wooden bench. Finally, his eyes, calm and unreadable, met Jared's. His answer came without a smile, without fanfare, a single, clipped word. "David." Once, that was it, just once. But Jared knew what it meant. It wasn't a dismissal, not exactly. It was something heavier. A door cracked open just wide enough to reveal a sliver of impossible light, a silent invitation to tread carefully. It was a statement that carried the weight of 1,000 untold stories, a lifetime of service condensed into a single syllable. Don't push it. So Jared didn't. Not yet. He simply nodded, the gesture a silent acknowledgement of a truth he hadn't expected to find in a coffee shop barista. He stepped back to his lane, the rhythm of his own shooting now feeling clumsy, unrefined, but not with the same rhythm, not with the same ease. His eyes kept drifting left, watching David, a newfound respect etching itself onto his features. David continued his meticulous routine. He wasn't fast, he wasn't flashy, he was precise, measured. Every movement had the weight of memory behind it, a silent echo of countless hours spent in hostile environments where a fraction of a second, a tremor in a hand, could mean the difference between life and death. When he reloaded, it wasn't with rush or flare, just calm, almost meditative efficiency. Mag in, slide check, fire. His grouping was tight, always was, each hole punched cleanly through the paper target, and after each shot he'd pause, a microsecond of stillness, as if replaying the moment before it happened again, analyzing, refining, perfecting. It was a level of control that most of the young recruits, fresh from their basic training, couldn't even conceive of. They aimed. David commanded. Jared's friends, engrossed in their own competitive world, didn't notice the subtle shift in their buddy's demeanor. They were laughing, comparing groupings, making bets on who could hit the tightest pattern. One of them, a younger guy named Petty, whose bravado often outstripped his skill, leaned over and chuckled, his voice carrying easily over the muted pops of their own firearms. Petty. "Hey, that old guy is still doing okay, huh? Probably just got lucky on that last mag." Jared didn't answer. His gaze remained fixed on David Chen, a silent intensity in his eyes. He just kept watching, kept thinking. Petty's dismissive comment, meant as a joke, simply solidified Jared's growing conviction. Because he'd seen that kind of shooting before. Not in YouTube videos, not in movies, but from instructors. The kind of instructors who didn't need to shout to command attention, whose very presence demanded a different kind of silence. The kind you shut up for. 15 minutes later, David finished his box of .45s, 30 rounds. Not one miss outside the inner circle. The cluster of holes on his target was almost impossibly tight, a testament to an unwavering hand and an unyielding will. He set the pistol down, the metallic click echoing in the now slightly quieter range. He pulled a faded, perfectly folded rag from his bag and began cleaning his weapon right there, without hurry, as if time itself bent to his will. The methodical movements of his hands, so precise, so ingrained, spoke volumes. Jared hesitated, his heart pounding a strange rhythm in his chest. He took another step over, the unspoken question heavy in the air. Jared. "Sir," he said quietly, his voice softer than he intended, "if you don't mind me asking, when did you serve?" David didn't answer at first. David, 6 to 74. The years hung in the air, heavy with unspoken history. Jared felt a jolt. Those dates, they resonated with whispers of clandestine operations, of a war fought in shadows and jungles. Jared, recon? Southeast Asia? David gave a half nod, a minimal gesture that spoke more than 1,000 words. David, among other places. That's when the volume of the other lanes began to fade. Not literally, but in feel, like the rest of the range had shrunk into a quiet corridor around Lane 7. The casual chatter, the boastful shouts, the rhythmic thud of less skilled shooters, all seemed to recede, replaced by a profound, almost reverent hush. Even the joking behind them softened, as if a collective awareness had spread through the air. A few of the younger guys had picked up on Jared's body language, on the sudden gravitas that had settled over him. One or two started watching from a distance, their earlier mockery replaced by a dawning comprehension. "Jared, did you ever train with the SEALs?" David allowed himself the faintest smile, a fleeting curve of the lips that held both amusement and the weight of countless memories. "David, we all did a little of everything back then. You swam, you survived, or you didn't." It was a stark, brutal truth, delivered with the quiet authority of someone who had lived it. Jared couldn't help but grin, a mixture of awe and nervous excitement. "Jared, sir, my CO told us about an op in 1971. Deep jungle recovery. The guy who led the exfil was wounded but carried 2 men out under fire. They said it was classified for years." David didn't blink. His gaze remained steady, reflecting nothing, revealing nothing. "David, a lot of things were classified for years." And just like that, the door closed again. Not harshly, not dismissively, but with the quiet finality of a chapter concluded. It was just enough to remind Jared that some stories weren't told. They were carried, like rounds that hadn't been fired, like names that weren't written on medals. David stood, a slight creak in his back as he stretched and zipped his range bag. The worn canvas of the bag felt somehow heavier, imbued with an unseen weight. Jared stepped aside instinctively, his body responding to an authority that transcended rank or uniform. A few of the other shooters looked over, curious now, quiet now. Something about the way the young SEAL moved, the deference in his posture, told them the man leaving wasn't just anyone. As David turned to go, Jared did something rare. He snapped to attention, his salute crisp and unwavering. No joke, no sarcasm, just pure, unadulterated respect. It was a gesture born of recognition, of understanding a depth that most would never glimpse. David stopped mid-step, his hand still on the strap of his bag. He looked back, his eyes searching Jared's, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Jared spoke clearly, his voice ringing with genuine admiration. "Jared, sir, thank you for your service. Truly." David studied him for a moment, a long, quiet pause that seemed to stretch time. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he walked back over to Jared. He didn't offer a handshake, didn't pat his shoulder. Instead, he reached into his pocket and placed something into Jared's outstretched hand. A coin, heavy, real. It bore the first recon insignia on one side, subtly aged but still sharp. On the other, deeply etched into the metal, was a single word: "Still here." It was more than a memento, it was a testament, a burden, a quiet promise. Then David leaned in, his voice low, a gravelly whisper that carried absolute truth. "David, you'll know when it's your time to go quiet. Until then, earn it." And then he walked away. No salute, no handshake, just a man disappearing into the morning sun, melting into the landscape as if he were part of the very shadows. He left behind a silence. A profound, echoing silence, far louder than any story he could have told. David was gone before most of them even noticed. No goodbye, no nod, just picked up his bag, thermos tucked under one arm, and disappeared into the rising sun like the morning was done with him. Jared stood there for a long moment, the weight of the coin still in his palm, its coolness a stark contrast to the sudden heat in his chest. His brain was spinning faster than his pulse. He'd seen men try to fake valor, their boasts hollow, their medals stolen. He'd seen posers wearing insignias they hadn't earned, patches made up from cheap fabric. But this was something else entirely. The coin wasn't decorative, it wasn't mass-produced. It was the kind of challenge coin that was never supposed to exist in the first place, a symbol of a brotherhood few had ever known, and even fewer survived. It was a ghost made real in his hand. "Buddy." "Yo, Jared," one of his buddies called from a few lanes down, his voice cutting through the sudden quiet. "You good?" Jared didn't answer at first. His gaze was fixed on the coin, a sudden revelation washing over him. Then he slowly turned and walked toward them, holding out the coin without a word. His friends crowded in around him, expecting a joke, another smart remark, a new boast. But as soon as they saw the insignia, the worn globe and anchor, the specific style, their faces drained of color. "Recon, old school, Vietnam era," they went quiet, dead quiet. The competitive banter evaporated, replaced by a stunned silence. Petty. "No way that's real," Petty muttered, his voice barely a whisper. All bravado gone. Jared. "It is." His voice was firm, resolute. Other guy. "Who gave it to you?" The question was hesitant, almost fearful. Jared's eyes scanned the empty lane David had stood in, a profound understanding in his gaze. "Jared, the man you all ignored, the one you laughed at, that was Staff Sergeant David Chen, 1st Recon, Vietnam." None of them responded. They didn't need to. The silence in their throats said more than words could. It was a silence born of shame, of awe, of a dawning realization that they had stood in the presence of a legend and completely, utterly missed it. Jared walked back to the front desk, holding the coin like a sacred object, its weight a constant reminder. The guy behind the counter was sipping coffee and scrolling his phone, utterly oblivious to the profound shift that had just occurred. He looked up casually. "Clerk, everything all right?" Jared placed the coin on the counter gently, its dull clink surprisingly loud in the now quiet space. "Jared, you know this man?" The clerk squinted, trying to place the face. "Clerk, that, old guy from Lane 7? Name's Chen. What's his first name?" The guy turned to his screen, tapped a few keys, the soft clicks of the keyboard, alien in the newfound quiet. "Clerk, let me check. David Chen signed up almost 10 years ago. Never missed a payment. No credit card, just cash. No email either. Old school all the way." He paused, a flicker of something new in his eyes as he scrolled down. "Clerk, whoa, says here he marked, 'Do not publish name for recognition events or honors.' That's rare." Jared leaned in, a question burning in his chest. "Jared, you know why?" The clerk shrugged, an innocent gesture that belied the weight of the story just revealed. "Clerk, nah, only thing he's ever said to me was once when I thanked him for his service. He looked me dead in the eye and said, 'I didn't do it for you to thank me.'" Guy chuckled nervously. "I didn't bring it up again." Jared didn't laugh. The clerk's casual dismissal of such a profound statement, such an immense sacrifice, felt like a punch to the gut. He just looked down at the coin again, its quiet presence speaking more than any words. Then, without saying another word, He walked out of the building. The sun was higher now, casting long shadows. But a new kind of shadow had fallen over Jared's world. That night, he couldn't let it go. The image of the coin, the old man's unwavering gaze, the single word, once, it all haunted him. He tried to sleep, couldn't. His mind raced, connecting the dots, piecing together fragments of stories he'd heard in hushed tones from older instructors. Around midnight, fueled by a restless energy, he booted up his laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He dug into declassified archives, searching for names, dates, operations. It took hours. The digital world, usually so immediate, felt painfully slow, frustratingly incomplete. Most names were redacted. Some dates were wrong on purpose, deliberate obfuscations meant to bury the truth deeper. But eventually, in a buried MACV-SOG, Military Assistance Command, Vietnam, Studies and Observation Group, log from 1971, it was there. One line, no ceremony, no headline, just a cold official record of a ghost in the jungle. SSGT David Chen, 1st Recon, Laos, March 6th. Extraction under fire. Recovered 7, refused medevac, wounded twice, declined award recommendation, buried. Note, asset considered irreplaceable. Now silent. That word hit Jared like a punch to the gut. Silent. That was the mission back then. You did the job. You didn't talk about it. You didn't write books about it. You didn't tweet about your trauma. You carried it. Quietly. Forever. And David Chen had carried it. All the way to that plastic bench at the range. All the way to that last box of .45 ACP. All the way through decades of being just another old man in a flannel shirt, blending seamlessly into the quiet hum of civilian life. He had built an impenetrable wall of anonymity around himself, a silent fortress against the ghosts of his past. But now Jared knew, and the truth, once seen, couldn't be unseen, and so did the rest of them. The word, whispered from Jared to his closest friends, spread like wildfire through the ranks, not loud, but with an undeniable force. The next time David showed up at the range, everything was different. The following week, David came back just like always. Same beat-up truck, same time, same quiet steps across the gravel lot, his worn boots crunching softly on the asphalt. He nodded to the guy behind the counter, signed his name on the clipboard, his movements a testament to decades of routine, and made his way to Lane 7. In his hand, the same old range bag, zippered halfway open with just one pistol inside. Same box of 30 rounds, same battered thermos tucked between his elbow and side, but this time the air felt different. It was palpable, a subtle shift in the very fabric of the range. Jared was already there, early, setting up his gear with a focused intensity. But he wasn't alone either. 3 of the guys from his team, the ones he'd shown the coin to, had arrived before sunrise and were waiting near the back bench, pretending to stretch, their eyes subtly tracking David's every move. They didn't say a word when David walked by, didn't interrupt him. They simply stood a little straighter, their shoulders back, their chests out, a newfound reverence in their bearing. They gave him a nod, a collective gesture of silent respect, and watched with the kind of attention usually reserved for instructors, for commanding officers, not old men in denim. The usual buzz of the range, while still present, was somehow muted, softened. David set up without a glance their way, his movements as fluid and efficient as ever. He pinned his target, adjusted his stance, a familiar comfort settling over him as he prepared for his solitary ritual. But he noticed the silence, not the absence of gunfire. There was still plenty, a steady thrum of activity, but the shift in tone, less chatter, less swagger, a little more respect in the way lanes were cleared, a wider berth given, a little more patience in the way mags were loaded. He felt the weight of their gazes, the shift in energy, but he offered no acknowledgement, maintaining his carefully constructed facade of quiet anonymity. His control was absolute. Halfway through his second string of fire, Jared stepped over. Not casual this time, composed, controlled. His presence, while respectful, was determined. He waited for David to finish his group, the final shot echoing, then quietly held something out. It was a fresh ammo box, sealed, .45 caliber. David looked at it, then at Jared. His eyes, usually unreadable, held a flicker of surprise, a silent question. No smile. Jared simply said, "Jared, I figured 30 wasn't enough today." For the first time in what felt like forever, David gave a nod that lasted more than half a second. A genuine, if subtle, acknowledgement. He accepted the box, his fingers brushing Jared's for a brief instant. A silent transfer of understanding. He reloaded calmly, the click of the fresh magazine familiar, comforting, and continued firing. Not a word passed between them. Just the soft, unmistakable rhythm of someone who knew exactly what he was doing, who had mastered a skill few would ever possess. Later, after the brass had settled, a shimmering carpet of spent casings on the concrete floor, and the smell of gunpowder had thinned from the air, David sat on the edge of the wooden bench, sipping from his thermos, the steam rising gently in the cool air. One by one, the younger men passed him, not as a crowd, not in a line, but quietly, individually. Each offered a gesture of respect, a small nod, a firm handshake, a simple "sir." Nothing rehearsed, nothing forced. It was pure, unadulterated respect, earned through a silent revelation. Petty, the kid who had joked a week earlier, lingered a little longer than the others, his usual bravado completely absent, replaced by a sheepish solemnity. He cleared his throat, struggling to find the right words. Petty, "We looked you up. Some of us, I mean. You saved a lot of people." His voice was low, almost reverent. David wiped the rim of his thermos with his sleeve, his gaze distant, lost in the shadows of memory. "David, they saved each other." His voice was soft, carrying the weight of a lifetime. Petty opened his mouth to respond, then thought better of it. He just nodded, the weight of David's words heavy in the air, and walked away. The last to remain was Jared. He sat beside David on the bench, the two men staring downrange at nothing in particular, the empty targets a stark reminder of the precision that had been witnessed. They didn't speak for a while, a comfortable silence settling between them, a language understood only by those who had walked through fire. Finally, Jared, his voice barely a whisper, asked, "Jared, you ever think about teaching?" David exhaled softly, the sound almost lost in the vastness of the range. "David, I spent 30 years trying to forget everything I teach, but some of us need to remember it." His voice held a hint of weary wisdom. David didn't respond right away, his eyes fixed on some distant point. He took another sip from his thermos, the warm liquid a small comfort. The sky outside had turned a deeper blue, the sunlight catching faint dust motes in the air, dancing in the quiet space. Finally, he turned slightly and said, "David, you don't teach this, you absorb it, Jared. Quietly, over time." Jared finished the thought, a growing understanding dawning on him. Jared nodded, a profound realization settling over him. "Jared, that's why I'm still listening." David looked at him longer this time, his gaze holding an almost paternal quality. Then he stood up, his movements still precise, still efficient. "David, then don't talk so much." They both chuckled quietly, a rare moment of shared levity. Before leaving, David left the fresh ammo box untouched on the bench. A small gesture, a silent acknowledgement that Jared had earned his respect, that some things transcended payment. That afternoon, the range staff made a small yet significant change. A brass plate, no larger than a business card, was discreetly screwed into the polished wood above Lane 7. It didn't say hero, it didn't say legend, it didn't even say recon. It just said, Lane reserved until he says otherwise. It was a silent testament, a quiet acknowledgment of the extraordinary, now housed within the ordinary. David never asked who put it there, and he never told them to take it down. Some men teach with words, others teach by presence. David never told war stories, never raised his voice, never asked for a thank you. He simply showed up, took his 30 shots, a quiet ritual of mastery, and left more impact than most men who speak for hours. He never needed to prove anything, not to the range, not to the young guys beside him, not even to the generation who forgot to ask. But when one of them, like Jared, finally looked close enough to see the truth beneath his sleeve, to truly understand the weight of his quiet existence, the silence broke. The veil of anonymity lifted, not with a roar, but with a whisper. That's the thing about real warriors. They don't advertise. They don't seek fanfare or headlines. They wait until someone is wise enough to notice the way they move, the way they stand, the way they don't need to be seen to matter. David didn't need a biography, didn't need applause. All he needed was that one recruit who looked past the surface, past the unassuming barista, and asked the right question. And from that moment on, every round he fired, every quiet movement, taught more than any lecture could. It taught them about discipline, about precision, about the silent power of true experience. Now I ask you, have you ever met someone like David Chen? A veteran who never bragged, never boasted, just stood quietly, carried history in his hands, and let time forget until someone remembered? Say their name in the comments. Share their story. Let others know who they were before the silence. Because at Human Stories, we believe that the most powerful stories don't shout. They wait. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, subscribe, share, and help us keep these voices alive. We'll see you in the next one. And until then, if you ever see an old man at the range reloading slow, standing alone, watch his stance. You might be standing next to a living legend.